Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Daily with Jay and Clay. We're glad you made it. We have some really important kind of staggered, I guess, topics. They're not really connected or dovetailed, but then again, they are because, the VA is a very nuanced beast. So I wanted to touch on a few of the things that we both collectively want you to know and we harp on consistently in our own channels. And so please hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. It really does help out the channel immensely with our goal of just reaching more veterans, spouses, dependents, and so forth. So with that, I'm going to kick it to you, Clay. You can kind of outline the topics that we're going to be talking about. And I will throw in a caveat for the folks that sometimes we like to run down those little side trails a little bit. So we might throw in a couple other nuggets along the way. We've been known to run down a few, right, Clay?
Oh, yeah. So the topics we're going to cover today are the top reasons why veterans are denied. As much as you need to understand at why your claim is going to be approved, I would argue you have to understand what the VA is going to argue against it. You have to play both sides as you're preparing that claim. We're also going to talk about VA rating reductions and what that looks like. And yes, the VA does reduce ratings. I've seen it many, many times, especially in my personal friends, my personal life that I have. And then we're also going to talk about VA healthcare as evidence and private records as evidence. And of note, evidence goes both ways. It's a two-way street. It's either for your claim or against your claim. So how do veterans navigate, right, seeking healthcare, building evidence, going to VA facilities, but not damage or reduce their disability ratings? And that is a huge topic. It's going to be a little controversial, but Jason and I will definitely give you the absolute best information that we possibly can. So, Jason, for you, starting with the top reasons why claims are denied, I know you've seen thousands of claims as a VSO. What is your 2 cents on why veterans' claims, broadly speaking, are denied?
Okay, I'm gonna start it off like this, Clay, and I know you're gonna probably laugh because you're not ready for this answer because this isn't really what you're thinking. When a veteran files the claim themselves,
Oh,
it
okay.
gets denied, right? That's not what you were thinking. So obviously, there's plenty of times that a veteran will get it right, but the problem is that sometimes we don't because we're working with limited information in our own mind of what we think the VA needs and what the VA will do for us in the claims process. And a lot of these are misperceptions or misconceptions. And working with an accredited representative who's gone down that road knows the things that you need to build and submit a fully developed claim.
Mm-hmm.
So your likelihood of getting awarded your claim is higher, in my opinion. So I'm gonna kick it off with my two reasons why, and then I'm gonna kick it back to you, Clay, because I want to drive down um, with some additional information on this. So my two reasons are typically the two reasons why a claim would get denied is either A, the nexus isn't there. You have lacked the ability to prove to the VA to at least as likely as not
Mm-hmm.
that your condition either manifested during your time in service or as a result of your time in service in some way. Okay. Now this is barring presumptives. So forget about presumptives because that's not really needed in this situation here. But that is a big one. And it's hard for folks to get over that hurdle sometimes because they don't have any hard, concrete evidence in service for their condition. And they don't know how to manufacture that evidence in support of their claim. So they get denied for nexus. The other thing that I see, Clay, is sometimes, and it's no fault of our own, right? It totally makes sense that you would think that the VA is this giant organization and they have a bunch of medical professionals that, hey, if I say I have migraines, guess what? I have migraines. I just never went to get diagnosed. I know I have them. So how about you help me out since you have 1,000 doctors right here
Yeah.
and I can walk in and you can just diagnose me and we can move on with my claim. So I'm just going to write down migraines. And here's my nexus. I complained of headaches when I was in. No real diagnosis, but I complained and I submit it. without a diagnosis. And a lot of times the VA is not going to do you any favors. So you've lacked the ability to prove that you even have the condition. So those are kind of my two. Now, I'm going to kick it back to you, Clay, with there's different reasons why folks would get denied a claim. The ones I gave were specific to basically filing for a service-connected condition.
Mm-hmm.
What about a secondary condition? What would be a reason somebody would get denied for a secondary condition?
So I would probably, and I'm saying this without looking at data, but I would probably bet my life that the most denials are from secondary claims versus initial direct claims, probably speaking. Okay. And here's why: is because, we'll take tinnitus as an example. I think it's a great example starting. Everyone knows, or the vast majority knows, tinnitus can get you 90%. Oh my gosh, 90% for tinnitus, right? And it's like, well, relax. Let's take a breath real quick. Let's breathe. What does that actually look like? And of course, they're talking about migraine secondary and anxiety secondary to tinnitus. So we'll use that as like the pinnacle examples. And so my question I always have for veterans is, does your tinnitus cause your migraines? What does that look like? And they say, the answer I always get is, yeah, my tinnitus causes migraines. I'm like, prove it, right? What is your evidence indicating that your tinnitus is causing your migraines? Because if you have none, in reality, what happens is you submit that secondary claim, everything's good to go, which is what you're supposed to do. But then you're relying on the CMP examiner to make that connection for you. And, CMP examiners, that's its own topic. You can bash them all day. And I would completely probably agree and understand with that. But at the same time, what option do they have? There's no evidence for them to build the nexus. And so it really comes down to, what is your evidence of that secondary condition? It's not just the current diagnosis, which is absolutely needed, but it's also evidence indicating that it stems from your primary, which in this case is tinnitus. And so, a kind of quick fix it ticket, so to speak, which is much more than this. But if I'm claiming tinnitus for migraines, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my VA healthcare team and say, hey, when my tinnitus acts up, when it flares up, I get some serious migraines. When I have my migraine, my tinnitus is elevated. That sensitivity to sound is exacerbated, and then it's kind of a self-flicking ice cream where my migraines get worse, my tinnitus gets worse. All of a sudden, you have evidence indicating. I'm not saying that's a, gavel on the desk, slam dunk win, but it's pretty darn good, right? And that same concept for anxiety secondary, it all comes down to, what is your evidence indicating? Because here's what happens: you either submit your claim with evidence or you don't. Okay, that's about it. One thing I do want to hit on, though, is competing evidence. And I think this topic gets overlooked by a lot of veterans. So I'm just going to throw out a simple scenario that is completely hypothetical, right? Let's say you're rated for tinnitus and you're claiming migraines. You've been out for 5 years, but 6 months ago at your construction job, you fell off a ladder, you had a TBI, and boom, that's it. You have TBI. I'm telling you right now, when you go to submit migraines secondary to tinnitus, they're going to say, whoa, you had this TBI from, your construction job 5 years after service. Migraines is probably linked to that. So that would be like competing evidence. And that is I'm not saying it's right or wrong. What I'm saying is, that's what the VA is going to use against you to deny that claim. So it's evidence for and then evidence against. Um, Going back to what you said, that is not what I thought you were going to say, actually, when you file a claim yourself, but it does make sense. Assuming that the veteran, just kind of submits that claim without evidence. One thing, or probably the number one reason I see, and it applies to the majority of veterans, especially in the Gulf War era, well, I guess all eras, is a lack of evidence from service. And that is probably like the biggest thorn in every veteran side. And it really comes down to medical evidence. CMP examiners are medical professionals, and so they want to see medical evidence, and it just kind of makes sense. The problem is, who the heck goes to sit call every day of the week when they're in service. No one does. You're going to be, you're going to be shunned. You're going to be shamed, kind of like Game of Thrones. Whenever she's walking down, they're like, shame. That's your walk to sit call. So it doesn't happen. So there's a lack of medical evidence. Our saving grace for that is there's evidence other than medical, but you really have to think about what is your evidence that's not medical. And I'll give an example. But you have to build that evidence. Maybe it's with a statement supported by current evidence. And the example is this: hey, I have 2 deployments. I was infantry. We patrolled. We did 2 patrols every day. We did this. We did that. Here's our combat load. I have no evidence from service, but I have current evidence showing my knees cartilage deteriorate. It got worse. I can't say that word for some reason right now. The cartilage in my knees are missing. It obviously, that's not an overnight thing. It takes years to do that. So now a medical professional can say, hey, that probably came from service. I think you're right. And so you kind of have to build that. Now, is it difficult? It absolutely is hard, right? But that's probably my number one reason as to why direct claims are denied. And then, of course, the secondaries is the lack of evidence. Do you have anything to add to secondaries or direct claims?
Not really, except for the fact that what you did say totally makes sense, and it's looking into your records for anything that can point to the causation, right? And doesn't have to be, the IED went off and I was in the vehicle, right? It could be, I never even deployed to a combat zone, but we trained a lot, and then we competed against other, I used this example the other day. Our mortar platoon would compete with other mortar platoons once a year on, just the force march, the, gun drill, all that stuff, right? And there was a lot of training that went into that. I mean, look, we get it. We all understand that you train hard and it wears on your body. So if you can prove, right, like, if you have an award, right, you won that competition, you are mortar platoon, and you got a whatever, some sort of a commendation medal or something for it. It's going to list in there what you accomplished, right? You did a 20-mile hike with a 150-pound combat load and blah 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 and all these things, right? That doesn't say that you damaged yourself, but it sure indicates that you probably could have.
Yeah. And
that helps you get that Nexus letter, which is the hardcore evidence that you need, because it's not from you, it's from a medical professional. So I'm just doubling down on what you said, Clay, there. I agree that the Nexus is by far the most commonly kind of reason why, and for all the reasons you said. I do want to touch on, since we're talking about denials, 2 other types of claims that get denied. Okay. And one would be a denial for an increase and a denial for a presumptive. Okay. So I'll let you have the increase, right? Denial for increase, and I'll do the denial for a presumptive. Okay. So presumptives are supposed to be super easy, and they are for the most part. However, sometimes we confuse the law a little bit with thinking that they made it super, super easy. All you need to do is just say yes and sign a form and we'll take care of you. You still need to prove that you have the condition, right? You may have hypertension. You may, right? You may have went to the doctor and the doctor may have said, your blood pressure's you're right on the line. It's a little high. Let's have you rest for a little bit. We've all had to do that, right? You're all stressed down or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, you just go sit over there and be quiet for a little bit, then come back. A little more calm, try to get a good reading. So you may tell yourself, you know what? I've had that history for a long time. I know I have high blood pressure, but you're not diagnosed, right? You've been told you're on the edge or whatever. And so you file a claim. I served in Vietnam, for example, in 1968, boots on the ground, was there, doing whatever I was doing. So I meet the qualifications and yeah, I have high blood pressure, bam. And I send it in and then I get denied, right? Well, you need to prove that you actually have the condition. You still need to prove you have the condition. So just make sure that you do it, because the VA is not doing anybody any favors and running out to make you an appointment for a diagnosis, typically. So there's always the off chance something weird happens, and you can rely on that, but it's a very tiny opportunity that raises its head. So please make sure you get your presumptive condition diagnosed,
Hmm.
and then all you need to do is prove your time in service in the location in which is specified, and that you actually have that diagnosed condition, and then submit that. So that's a denial for that I'll see sometimes on a, because people get trigger happy, right? Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I can file for this. Bam, bam, bam. And next thing you know, you filed for 7 things through VA.gov, and you're just hitting buttons, submit, yeah, and then you're waiting, and then they deny. So how about increases? Unless you want to add anything to the presumptives, you could
I
do both.
do. I do, because I had this situation happen maybe 3, 4 weeks ago. A veteran that I've known for a while reached out to me, and this is a legit 100% true story. He was 94%, right on the line
Yeah,
of a
yeah,
life changing benefits.
yeah.
And he does rate PACT Act. He had asthma and sinusitis, and of course, a ton of others. And I asked him, I said, hey, uh, the commonly speaking, people who have sinusitis also have rhinitis, and they are not commingled. It's just common to see both. And I had told prior to 3, 4 weeks ago, I told him this almost a year ago. I said, "Hey, man, file for rhinitis." And so he hits me back up on Facebook, sends me a message. Hey, I'm still 94%. Is there any way you can help me out? I scrolled up and I was like, oh, did you ever file for rhinitis? He says, no. I was like, well, are you diagnosed? He's like, yeah. I was like, dude, file for rhinitis. Okay. And he was worried because sinusitis and rhinitis, he had thought that they're going to rope them together, just like they do asthma, sleep apnea, and COPD, right? Those will be roped together. Sinusitis, rhinitis won't be. But something I bring that up because I want to say this. I tell veterans, right? Because you're not going to understand the VA's process soup to nuts. It's not going to happen. Let the VA do VA stuff. Hypothetically, if they roped sinusitis and rhinitis together, which they don't, but let's just say they do, it's not your problem. Your problem is submitting an evidence based claim. Anyways, long story short, he submitted the rhinitis claim. Boom, he got 10%. Now he's 100, right? And what stopped him an entire year of benefits was he had thought sinusitis and rhinitis was linked, but it's not, right? So let the VA do VA stuff. We submit evidence based claims. That's all I wanted to
Good
add
point.
on that. But
Yeah.
looking at denial for increases, which is a solid subject I didn't even think about. And I'm going to give the technical answer, and then I'll give you my solid my recommendation, which I think is solid. So the technical answer is, do you need evidence to submit an increase? And that answer is no. You can go on va.gov right now. I could submit an increase for every single condition I have in about 3 minutes, right? It would take me probably 5 minutes because va.gov is weird. I could do that. And if you do that, what's going to happen is it'll warrant the CMP exam, and then you are at the mercy of that examiner, right? The CMP examiner will have to reevaluate using what's called a DBQ for that condition, whether it's a back, a knee condition, whatever. And, the odds may be what happens is the examiner actually does rate you higher, and you're awarded an increase. That is totally possible. What's also possible is the opposite, where they're like, yeah, you're all right. Your 45 degrees flexion is actually 80 degrees, so you have more range of motion. So now we're going to decrease you. That's also a possibility. And I bring that up because I say this: if if I had to tell a veteran one thing on disability and that's it, I couldn't say anything else, it would be this: do not give a reason for the CMP examiner to fabricate evidence, right? Fabricate is probably not the right word, but I guess create the evidence. Don't do that. And so I would recommend veterans treat an increase just like every other claim. If my migraines are getting worse, you know what the first thing I'm going to do is? I'm going to say, I'm going to go to va.gov, send a secure message to my healthcare team or private insurance, whichever you prefer, and say, hey, doc, hey, healthcare team, my migraines are getting worse. Is there a way I can up my prescription for medication? I'm getting 4 migraines a month. Whatever your symptoms are, have that appointment. Submit. You already have the intent to file because we are educated veterans, and so now we have the intent to file. We have the evidence with that claim. So if the examiner says, "Well, you get 2 migraines per month," and what will most likely happen, just to be real, is the rater will see that. They're not looking at your evidence. They're just looking at the DBQ from the C&P examiner. And that's what happens in reality. It's not right. And so that will probably come back as a denied increased claim. But because you have the evidence, you now do a higher level review, informal conference. A rater will call you in about 2 or 3 months. And I know it sucks, but you have to do this. Okay. And say, hey, I do have 4 to 5 migraines per month and I can prove it. All of a sudden you have the evidence and that's it. That is, I'm not saying it's right because the process shouldn't work like that. But evidence, veterans can lean on evidence. You take that same scenario and you don't have the evidence, that C&P examiner's, evaluation is the gospel for that increased claim. And that's it. And you're stuck with that. And so my number one advice is just do not allow the C&P examiner to kind of, be the only piece of evidence that you have
Mm-hmm.
in your claim. It
Mm-hmm.
might work out in your favor. It might not.
Right. Yeah. You want to stack the odds in your favor, right?
Yeah.
So, and I absolutely agree. The tip here is utilize the schedule of ratings for your specific condition. Read through it. If you realize, wow, I have all the things required for this next level up rating, I should file for an increase. Well, you need to make sure that you take that information with you to your doctor, like you said, and make sure that that information, that exact verbiage is being embedded into your medical records. And that's why when that doesn't happen, that's how you get denied for that increase, right? Is because there's the lack of evidence. So you need to create the evidence in order for them to successfully give you an increase. It's just that's the reality. So and the thing is that it's all there. You should know whether or not you're going to qualify for an increase or not. Read through it. If you rate the next level up by reading it, you're the patient. I say this all the time. Nobody knows you better than you. The doctor's asking you questions because you're the patient. So you can sit there and read all the criteria for each rating. And if it's the next one up, then you should rate that. You just need to figure out how you can articulate it into the medical records. And it's as simple as telling your doctor, hey, I want to make sure that all this gets annotated, right? I want to make sure that all of this stuff here that I'm telling you gets put in here. It is really important to me to track all of this stuff, right? Sometimes the VA side's a little bit funky. Your civilian side is good. Utilize the DBQs, those types of things. Always a good idea. But like I always say, the DBQ by itself is nothing unless you have the right information to put in it. Garbage in is garbage out. Utilize the schedule of ratings. That, in my opinion, if I had to pick one of the two, have access to the schedule of ratings or have all the DBQs. DBQs are garbage. Give me all the schedule of ratings because I can just have those conversations with my doctor and have them input everything I need into my medical records, which is exactly the same as what the DBQ is doing. So that's my little soapbox on that. We covered a lot on denials. We covered just a standard claim denials. We covered secondaries. We covered increases. We covered presumptives. That's pretty sweet. It's not sweet that you got denied. It's important that you know why you get denied, so that way those of us that haven't filed yet can know what not to do, which is important. All right, Clay, back to you.
All right, so let's transition into VA rating reductions. And this is a very hot topic, and it's kind of depressing, really. It's one of those depressing VA topics because no one wants to get a reduction for VA disability. This does happen. I will say this though, and this is not looking at data, but just looking at veterans that I've been in communication with, I think we've seen less reductions recently than we have in the past. That's probably due to a very ferocious OIG report of 22, but that's another topic for another day, and that's just my guess. But I will say this: when it comes to it, actually does happen. Is probably 2 3 months ago, a veteran reached out to me who was 100%, not P&T, who was 100% and did get a reduction for mental health from 70 all the way down to 10.
30,
Right.
10.
10.
Oh,
So it does happen. Okay. It does happen. And I will shed more light as to why that veteran, because once he told me that, I was like, you know what? Let's dive into this. Okay. And the reason for that was he left service, immediately left service, excuse me, was rated for mental health and did not seek health care for about 2.5 years.
mm-hmm,
And when the reevaluation came up, what does the
mm-hmm,
VA see? Nothing,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Nothing. Silence is
mm-hmm.
consent. That's a joke.
Yep.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much what happened. They're like, hey,
Right.
you are healthy enough to not seek health care.
Right.
Therefore, that's the argument that they're going to use. So it does happen.
Right.
Now, I want to give the 38 CFR code, and then I'm gonna kick it back to you. But for anyone that really wants to just read it from the horse's mouth, as Jason likes to say, and this is probably less than 100 words. Okay, if you go to 38 CFR 3.327, which is for reexaminations, you will
Mm-hmm.
see every reason, and it lists them out. And we're going to go over these soon, but you'll see every reason the VA will and will not schedule a reexamination. So, on that note, before I go down a rabbit hole, Jason, what do you have on reductions, reexaminations, and just that depressing kind of,
Right.
doom and gloom cloud over our
Yeah.
heads?
Yeah. So, and this all goes to the don't poke the bear idea about all of this. And I think that's kind of a primitive way to look at it. What we
I
need to
completely
do,
agree.
and look, and here's the thing, and you say this all the time, and it really applies here with regard to being educated, right? There's a lot of strength that comes with being educated. So when you file your initial claim for 7 different conditions, and it comes back, and it's we've had this conversation before. How many people actually read the whole thing, right, front to back, even the little garbage paper inserts, just to make sure that it really is a garbage paper, just kind of additional insert thing, right?
Mhm.
Very few. Somewhere in there, it's going to say, guess what? We're going to have a future exam on that condition. Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know, VA, because I am going to continue to go to all of my appointments like a good boy or girl, right? Because look, at the end of the day, what happens here is exactly what Clay said. And I had, not personally, but I'm well aware of multiple situations where people are like 100%, woohoo, and off they go, and they never go back until they get a call about a C&P exam, re-examination, and the first call they make, well, in this case, because I was accredited, veteran service officer, call my, hey, I got this letter from the VA, and they want me to come in, and do I have to go? Yeah. I hope you've been going to your appointments. No. Okay. Well, there's a good chance you might get denied. I'm just letting you know now. So continue to be seen. Another reduction that will be common is cancer, right? So
Yeah.
when it's active, you're 100%. But as soon as you go into remission, well, they're going to reduce you. You're going to have some residual effects and some problems and all that stuff, but you will get reduced. So I guess kind of a side note here, one of these little trails, nuggets, we'll call it a nugget trail. One of these little nugget trails that we run down is I always suggest to folks, look, if you have the ability, if you're not 100% P&T, permanent and total, continue to look for other conditions that you could add to your overall. Because if you have some big ones like mental health or cancer or something like that, that's bringing you to 100%, but not permanent and total, it doesn't take very long to get reliant on that money.
Mm-hmm.
And if it goes away, life really starts to get hard. So you need to keep an eye open for these other conditions that you could potentially file for while you're in this situation, um, to help bump you up in the event that the other ones get reduced. So it's one of these weird things, and everybody here that watches this gets it. It's the weirdest world, right? It's like, man, my situation's really bad. It really sucks. Oh, good. That means you're going to have a great rating. Oh, man, I'm better. I'm getting better on this condition. I don't know. Man, that really sucks, because now you're going to get lowered, right? So it's weird when you tie money to health,
Yeah.
right? Because it really, because I mean, the two things you need in life is health and money. And in this situation, you can't really have both, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. So it's a really weird world that we're in. I guess it's the best we could do, but I would say that that's kind of my 2 cents on that subject, Clay. So we'll jump back to you on your list for re-exam. I love this list, by the way. I've done videos on my channel. I'm sure you've done them on yours regarding this. This is one of my favorite kind of things, because again, it's just additional knowledge, right? It kind of helps to take a little bit of, does the VA always get it right? No, but it's nice to know that there are some levels here of different protections, is what I would call it. So we'll kick it back over to you, Clay.
Absolutely. So this list is a no periodic future exams will be requested if, and I'm going to go ahead and list them down. I'm going to caveat this though, or kind of give you, an upfront. You're going to hear a word called static. Static just means the disability is not likely to improve over the span of the veteran's life. When your static disabilities equal 100%, that is how veterans get 100% P&T. Okay, it has to be static. Now, every time we say this on whatever channel you watch, I guarantee you're going to see 50 comments below that video that says, "How do I know my conditions are static?" Okay, it's happened every time. There's two things I want to say. The technical answer, which is just request your rating code sheet from your regional office. Requesting a single sheet, a rating code sheet, is generally fast. It's probably 3 days to 2 weeks. You'll get that. If you request your entire C file, that's going to be like 6-7 months just to be real, right? But rating code sheet will tell you lumbar strain, diagnostic code, whatever it is, static, not static, not static, static. That's how you find out. But I'm going to give you a general answer, and this is what I've seen, and it kind of goes along with the medical consensus. And no, I'm not a doctor, but I read a lot, okay? Generally speaking, a diagnosed musculoskeletal condition does not heal. What do I mean by that? I mean, like, cartilage in your knee has disappeared. You have IVDS in your back. You have surgery on your shoulder, surgery on your wrist. None of those are healing. There's nothing you can do short of a miracle to make your joints and your bones heal. So 99% of the time, that's deemed static. There's a warning there, though, is, sometimes the diagnosis, if you look at the ICD code, which is International Classification for Diseases, which is a formal diagnosis, lower back pain can be a diagnosis. And under the VA schedule of ratings, pain with full range of motion is generally 10%. And that's for wrist, elbows, back, knees. I mean, basically everything. But it is a diagnosed condition, but not in the sense of like L4, L5 spine deteriorated, right? It's different. It's a strain. And so those musculoskeletal conditions are probably, it depends on you if those are static versus like a IVDS or a spine injury. Just food for thought. I just wanted to say that generically. The most common conditions that are not static are mental health is probably up. I mean, cancers are number one, but mental health is probably up there because mental health with treatment I'm not saying it can heal, but it's been proven to improve,
Right.
And so that emotional distance you feel with your kids over time through years of treatment could improve. So generally speaking, if you're 100% with a 70% rating for mental health, I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar that it's mental health. Okay. But I just want to say that up front. Here's the list for re-examinations. And this is again 38 CFR 3.327. You can read this for yourself. I'm going to start at number 2. I'm going to read it verbatim. So there's no, I don't want to put my spin on this. This is exactly what it says. No periodic future examinations will be requested in service-connected cases. No periodic re-examination will be scheduled. And here's the list. When the disability is established as static, got it. When the findings and symptoms are shown by examinations of this section or other exams and hospital reports, remember that because we're gonna revisit this, hospital reports to have persisted without material improvement for a period of 5 years or more. So that's the first kicker, 5 years. Where the disability from disease is permanent in character and of such nature that there is no likelihood of improvement. That's like the IVDS diagnosis in the back, right? There's 3 more. In cases of veterans over 55 years of age, except under unusual circumstances. And I'm going to read that one again because this is another common question I get. I'm 61. Am I going to be reduced? That answer is no. In cases of veterans over 55 years of age, that answer is no. It says unusual circumstances, and generally it's going to get back at those cancers, right? You have cancer. If your cancer metastasizes, meaning it goes other places, all of those can be reduced on residuals given it's healed, right? And when I say healed, I mean until it comes back. Personally, I don't think that's right. I think that needs to be a change, but that's the VA. That's how the VA is working, right? 2 more. When the rating is prescribed schedule minimum, like a 0%, can't be reduced, obviously. And then here's the big one here is let's say you are 100% total and your hearing loss goes from 10 to 0. If that hearing loss 10 to 0 doesn't take you from 100 to 90, then they won't reduce hearing loss. Okay. And so the VA will wait until your reductions reduce your overall rating, whether that's 90 to 80, 90 to 50, 100 to whatever, your overall rating has to be reduced. So the VA they are handpicking disabilities. They're not looking at your overall rating, if that makes sense. So that's straight from the horse's mouth. Jason, do you have anything else on re-examinations?
Yeah, I just want to kind of clarify the last one a little bit. It's not so much that this isn't about everything that Clay just said is absolutely true, but it's not directly the VA will not reduce you because of these. No. The VA will not re-examine you. The re-examination could lead to a reduction, if that makes sense. So this is all about re-examinations. The only reason you would have a re-examination is if your condition is not static, right? All of these other ways, the first way is talking about being static, right? So if they deem you static, then all the other ones, except for the last one really, or the last 2 kind of, are just other ways to say that your condition is probably static, right? As we age, we heal not as effectively, right? So because you're 55 and older, you're probably not going to get better just because of age, which means that it's probably static. The 5-year thing, right? If it's been deemed basically flatlined for a period of 5 years or more, they're calling that static. Now, an important piece here, and again, this goes back to, I love how Clay said it, right? Educated. Because you know this, right? This is where the rubber meets the road, right? We can sit here and talk all day long. If you don't do anything with it, it doesn't matter. This type of information is valuable because what I hear in this is, oh, so you mean if I'm going to file for GERD today and I just got diagnosed, I don't know, a couple years ago, okay, that's not 5 years, but let me try to hedge my bets a little bit and see if I could manufacture some additional evidence with my doctor and let them know, hey, look, I've had GERD since I was in service 15 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So can you please put that the onset or the manifestation of my GERD has been since back here? If they do, and they make it clear, the VA may go, oh, it's been more than 5 years. We're going to call that static, right? They may. Now, they may go, well, we just got the earliest diagnosis we have is 3 years ago, right? We're not at the 5-year mark, even though there is evidence in there that says that it was prior. They could still go, we're not going to give them static, so we'll make it not with a future exam, right? So you're going to have this future exam. However, now you know that once you hit the 5-year mark, right, that now you've hit the 5-year mark, you've been going, you've done your follow-up CNP, you have all this, you're going in with power. You know, hey, look, I've been going once a year to my doctor for my GERD. Now we're at 6 years since I've had it. It has not gotten any better. I have a letter from my doctor that says that it's static, and it's been 6 years now, and I'm at my CNP exam. You have a good chance to get that now all wrapped up and put into a static category. Now, I'm going to give a quick story here on this, and I love that you tied in that last one, Clay, with the 100% aspect. What Clay was saying there, just to kind of say it again, is if you have 8 conditions and all together they take you up to over 100%, all of them are static except for one, right? So all of a sudden it's like, well, you have this one future exam out there that could happen, but the VA will look at it and go, okay, well, if it doesn't change my overall rating, whether this is a 0 or a 30, it doesn't matter. So then they'll just go, well, we don't even need to do an exam. They'll just call it a day and move forward. And it's just to save time and resources, right? Why re-examine you for something that it will make no difference on how much money they're paying out? This isn't a medical appointment to check you and check your care and make sure that you're solid. This is for compensation. So remember that that's a big difference. This is to pay you money, not to take care of you, right? The VA, VHA is for that. Now, the quick story is VA will not always get this right. This is back onto the permanent and total aspect. Most people will not just get 100% permanent and total out the gate, one shot, you're done. Most people are going to file multiple claims, adding secondaries, looking for increases, finding another service-connected piece. And, next thing you know, it's been 7 or 8 different claims over a period of however many years with appeals and all kinds of things involved. So there's been a lot of moving pieces, okay? Some of these conditions were static. Some had future exams. Some over the course of time have now had the 5-year rule in effect. Now those have turned static. Maybe you've turned 55, so other things have. All that to say is that sometimes the VA doesn't keep up. There's no magical flashing light that shows up to say, hey, this person has all static conditions up to 100% now. We need to change them to permanent and total. There's no flashing lights for that. So sometimes you need to let the VA know. So for example, I'll give the fast version, Clay. I personally filed a bunch of different claims over the course of time, and I finally got to 100%. Great. Was not permanent in total because I had one condition that was, and it was GERD, and it had a future exam, so out 3 to 5 years from that time period. So super excited, 100%. Not super excited because it's not permanent in total, so you get that whole kind of weary thing like, man, I hope I don't ever get reduced. But in the meantime, I also had an appeal with the board for migraines, looking for an increase. If that went through, I no longer needed GERD to be at 100%. It did get approved. They kicked it back to the VA and said, it's approved, higher percentage, let's call it a day. It remained static. So now all my conditions are static at 100%. I no longer needed GERD to be at 100%, so it could be a 0, doesn't matter. So I had to contact VA and say, hey, look, all of these conditions over here that are static add up to 100%. The GERD that I had the future exam for is not even relevant. You could take it away completely. I don't need it to have my 100% static conditions. And then they switched me over to permanent and total. And then here we are today, right? So sometimes the VA doesn't have the time to figure it all out unless you're specifically requesting it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to look for it. So just a little side note. Back to you, Clay. Did that spark any thoughts in your mind?
No, it didn't spark any thoughts. So I just want to say I do want to point out to the veterans is the only I'm not saying the only reason in a bad way, but right, the only reason you got P&T in that scenario is because you were on top of your claims. No one cares about you more than you do, right? The VA's not going to be like, we forgot, sorry.
Right.
Not going to happen.
Right.
It can happen, but probably not, right? So it's the same concept as submitting a claim without evidence and relying on the CMP examiner. If you rely on the examiner or if you rely on the VA to do the right thing, and I know that's a negative connotation, but if you rely on someone else, you are at the mercy of their due diligence, right? And we're talking humans here. People make mistakes all the time. I wouldn't put it past the VA in your situation, whoever that rater was that did make the increase, just kind of made it. It was 4:30 and they went home for the day, right? That's a plausible scenario that probably happened. And so just be on top of your situation. That's all I really wanted to add. And I think it's a great example. Transitioning onto VA healthcare specifically as evidence. And I want to bring back in the future reexaminations where it said hospital reports to have persisted without material improvement. And that's a good segue into VA healthcare as evidence. Evidence is a two-way street. There's evidence that supports your claim, and then there's competing evidence, right? Or evidence that does not support your claim. And so you have to be aware of what your evidence tells you. Now, I'm going to tell another story of a good friend of mine who left the Marine Corps, and he had, I'm not trying to, he's going to watch this because he's a great friend of mine. I don't want to make his head big, but this dude is like a modern day warfighter. Okay. He is where the rubber meets the road. This was his whole career, and he's been there and done that seriously. So it's like TBI, mental health, all this stuff happening. And he leaves service, he submits his claims, boom, he got whatever. He's seeking VA healthcare, which I say all the time, seek healthcare, forget benefits, seek healthcare because you need healthcare. Okay. But he went in there and just speaking with him, and I'll kind of give a, not to release too much of his information, but the conversation he pretty much had with his healthcare team was, hey, my mental health is a lot better. I'm out of the Marine Corps. I have a great job. I have a wife. I have dogs. I have kids. I'm doing great. Like, I still have this stuff, but like my life is good. I swear on my life, he was reduced from 70 to about, I think, 30, maybe 10. He was reduced. Okay. And the point I want to bring up is, yes, seeking healthcare is good. But make no mistake. And I don't want to be, ooh, everyone's watching you. Okay. But the facts are when you go to VA healthcare, that is evidence. And if you miraculously heal, right, via testimony, because you can't x-ray mental health, it's something to be aware of. Now, do I want veterans, and I have to say this before I turn it over, do I want veterans to go in their healthcare appointments for mental health and lie or hold something back? That's not what I'm saying. And here's what I would recommend in a technique that I would use personally, right? I walk in my appointments and my healthcare provider's like, hey, how's your mental health been going? What I would say, instead of saying I'm miraculously healed, right? You create that narrative. You still be truthful. You create that narrative and say, you know what? I've been, I've done cognitive based training or behavior based, whatever the therapy is called. I've done the courses, I've learned techniques. It's helped me manage my symptoms better. Okay. But they still occur, right? These symptoms aren't going away. But I'm better at managing it. That's how I would give that conversation because it kind of protects you. Okay. And I don't want to give the connotation that the VA is out to get you because they're not. But at the same time, if you give them evidence saying this veteran is completely healed, legally, if you're up for a reevaluation, that's evidence they're going to use in support of that reduction, and that's the truth. Okay, so Jason, before I go in like a prepper, I don't want to give people a prepper mindset and hide from the VA. What are
Right.
your thoughts on VA healthcare as evidence,
Yeah.
either for
Yeah.
or against?
Right. Yeah. No, good point. And I love that you said the techniques, the skills that I've learned have helped me cope and manage with my, situation, right? That's a great way to put it. I'm a fan of, well, I'm trying to think about the best way to frame this. So kind of like you, right? So
It's hard. It's hard. Yeah.
So yes, everything that you do with the VA, and in some cases, you don't have any other choice but to go to the VA for your healthcare, right? So we're just going to assume that that's the situation here. Now, which is fine, in my opinion. You just need to be smart with what you're doing. But all of this kind of conversation is around the axle of ratings and reductions and evidence of doing that. So the thing is that when it's VA has access to VA stuff. So that part's easy for them. Your words do matter, but here's my kind of take on it. And I'm the mindset of here's the thing I'm a fan of that I didn't quite get to, of swimming upstream. So my idea here is that I think that many veterans pick 2 or 3 conditions that they're like, these are the things that are really bothering me, or I think are going to give me a high percentage, and let's just file those and call it a day. And if they get to 100%, they're like, woohoo, and they move on. And in my opinion, that's the wrong way to look at it, because then you fall into these weird little situations that suck. So instead, you should go, okay, cool. Maybe you filed for those, but a lot of people. Now, I'm going to kind of caveat this a little bit with, or preface it rather with, it's gotten a lot better with the times changing and having things like YouTube and that type of stuff, and other resources for folks to read. It was a lot worse before. It still sucks today, but it just doesn't suck as bad. There are ratings out there for practically every single condition you can think of, as long as it is chronic in nature or has some sort of a residual effect. And sometimes the things you don't think are going to be big could be big, like migraines. And you could be thinking to yourself, everybody has migraines. That's not military specific, so why even bother? Or GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, that bad heartburn, right? Uncle Joe's got it, Aunt Susie, who cares, man? Everybody gets that. It's just part of getting older or whatever. I just can't eat, Grandma Mussolini's, pasta anymore or whatever, right? So the point is that those things can rate, I get it. The audience we're talking to probably gets it, but it's the people that you talk to that you can help shed the light on this stuff for. That, migraines could be 50%. Heartburn, bad GERD could be 60%. And if you had those 2 things and then your PTSD got reduced to 30, who cares? You're still 100%,
Yeah.
right? So I think that is an important piece that needs to be talked about, because I think that sometimes we just go, good enough, and move on, because we have that rub dirt on it attitude. We have that, it took me enough to kind of just get here to do this, and I'm good with what I got. I have a buddy of mine who, believe it or not, and it is nails on a chalkboard for me, and I can't stand it. Oh, so much. It bothers me. But you know, it's one of these situations where it's like you got to help those that want the help. You can't help those that don't want it. He is medically retired from the Navy, medically retired. He did like 16, 17 years or something like that. Medically retired chief from the Navy with a 30% rating. Do you know how much that irritates me? I can't even tell you how much that irritates me. I'm like, they medically retired you and you have that much time in. There are surely a bunch of other things that we could deal with here. You could probably, maybe even get to 100%. I'm just saying, right? Nah, I'm fine, whatever. Okay, you know, you do you. So the point is that the evidence out there absolutely will be used for and against you and your conditions. Reductions do happen; they are a real thing. Um, you know, the best way to protect yourself against a reduction is have other ratings that help offset that. There are some conditions that can get better, and I will throw this out there. There's some conditions you're like, you know what? I will pay you if I could be better.
Yeah.
I would give you $500 a month if I'd never had to deal with any of that ever again. So I get it. And I hope people get better. It's just, it sucks when you lose the money. And that goes back to that other piece we talked about. Money and health are like two very important things. And really, you kind of need both. And so we're in this weird predicament with VA where it's like, I want to get better, but then I'm losing money, and then that sucks, and then that screws me up. And well, guess what? Maybe after you had your reduction, now your anxiety and stress went up, so now you go back and file for an increase, right? So I don't know. I feel like I'm going to talk in circles if I keep talking. My big point is the swimming upstream and just more is better. For some of these conditions, it's just almost unavoidable because you do want to get better. You don't want. Most people who are 100% PTSD don't want to be 100% for PTSD, right? Mm-hmm. There's some conditions where you're like, you know what, this really sucks, but at least I can still function, mostly normal, unless you ask my wife. And then, I think just knowing that some conditions can get better, can cause a reduction, and being aware of that is important, and leveraging other conditions, secondaries or increases on other conditions is important. So back to you, Clay, before I just keep saying the same thing five different ways.
So I do want to address this because, we've talked about, I like how you said around the axle of reductions, which does inherently give VA healthcare kind of like a bad taste. But there's an opposite to that because I am a huge fan of VA healthcare, especially when it comes to evidence. And I'm telling you right now, if you have a disability that is up for reevaluation and you have zero, and I mean zero evidence of VA healthcare records showing that you're seeking treatment for that condition has gotten worse or gotten better, the lack of evidence in lieu of is going to you're going to get a reduction. And in that instance, okay, let me roll back. In that instance where you have mental health, there's zero evidence it was up for reexamination. Can the VA reduce you without an exam? They absolutely can, because technically speaking, they have all the evidence they need to issue that reduction. Now, there's a whole 30-day, 60-day appeal process you can deal with, but to just avoid that, okay, seek healthcare, because that can also protect your ratings, okay? So it goes in, it's this weird tandem relationship where I would advise veterans to, I wouldn't say be careful because that's not the right connotation I would advise. I would just say be mindful of the words that come out of your mouth when it goes to your healthcare team, right? And just be honest. Say, hey, I'm dealing with this. It hurts. It still hurts. Or I'm managing it better, right? Hey, physical therapy for my back, it is helping me because I'm doing strengthening on my hamstrings, right? So now my hamstrings are taking more of the load. My back still hurts, right? And so that's how I would navigate that. So VA healthcare is good. That's what I want to end that with. And then I want to transition to, Jason, our last topic, which is private healthcare records. And there's two sides of this too. I generally see when a veteran has evidence from private healthcare records, and it blows my mind. They submit the claim, and then it's denied, and they're like, "Hey, I had all the evidence." I'm like, "Well, let's look at your decision letter." And when they say I have all the evidence, I see no in-service, record, no current diagnosis. I'm like, "Well, this says you don't." And then they say, "Oh, well, I have private records." So then I go in the decision letter, right below the decision is the evidence that was reviewed, and I look. It says VA healthcare records, DBQ from CMP examiner, DD 214 or whatever it is that the evidence reviewed, and I don't see your private records. Meaning, you have to submit your private records with your claim. Now that works two ways. One, which is what I recommend, is only sending the VA the relevant medical evidence. If you're claiming a knee condition, they don't, you don't need to send in your blood work records, just the relevant evidence for your knee. And the second way, which I don't really recommend, I think it's a 4142. Don't quote me on that, but it's VA form that allows the VA to request your private records in its entirety. Okay. And the reason I would not recommend that is because there could also be competing evidence, right? There's evidence for, there's evidence against. I'm on the page of the veteran requesting their private records, which is a billion times easier than getting it from the VA. Okay. Request your private records, and then you handpick the evidence you want the VA to see. That's my recommendation for that. Do you have any 2 cents on private health records? And obviously this applies to those veterans that have access to private insurance, which in a lot of cases is not the case.
Right. So you nailed exactly my same sentiments on that. And that is the beauty of private medical records, going and seeing a private doctor somewhere, is that you can control what the VA receives. And I'm in the same camp as you. There's no reason to have the VA get your records for you. Get them yourself. One, it's faster. Mm-hmm. So as far as sake of time is concerned, it's faster if you get them versus the VA. And again, you get to have eyes on everything, supply only what's needed to support the claimed condition or conditions that you're filing for. There's no reason to have anything else in there. So yes, absolutely. The other thing is, in contrast to the majority of VA medical facilities, the private side is more apt to work with you with regard to DBQs, with regard to Nexus letters, that type of stuff, if need be, for a claim, versus the VA healthcare system. A lot of VA healthcare systems out there, they don't want to complete a DBQ for you. They don't want to get involved with writing a Nexus letter, those types of things. There are workarounds, right? You can just use the verbiage from the schedule of ratings, right, in your appointments, and just make sure that you're very direct with that. And then maybe go to the little office and give them a form that you want to have them add into your medical records regarding your signs and symptoms, just so that way it's put in there. But with the civilian side, private medical, you have a better opportunity to work with the doctor to really, I guess we'll call it manufacture. I don't know why I like that word now, but to manufacture the evidence that's needed to support your claim, specifically with regard to VA claims for compensation, right? Because they're looking for certain things. So you can work with your doctor with that. One of the drawbacks that I hear sometimes is, maybe the doctor doesn't want to do it, or the doctor doesn't want to complete the DBQ, or they feel, whatever, which way about it. A couple different, I'll put it out there like this. In some cases, you're going to have a medical provider, doctor, who maybe that's been the family doctor. They've known you since you were whatever age, and it's a very bedside mannery type thing, smaller kind of venue. So they may be more apt to that, and maybe even block off time to be like, hey, let's set another appointment and we'll sit down and we'll complete this thing together. That's awesome. Not everybody gets that. So you might have to drop it off at your doctor's front office and say, hey, I need the doctor to fill this thing out. My suggestion is if you're not able to sit side by side with your doctor to fill this thing out, and I'm like a broken record. You are the patient. You know you better than anybody. So if you're not able to be there as a resource for that doctor, then my suggestion is, look, don't complete the form for them, right? You're not supposed to. It specifically says you don't do that. But you could take another sheet of paper and go, okay, here's my response to item 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, because you're not there to answer the questions if he has a question for you. So you want to be able to supply them with the information they need to be able to complete the form. How often are you having this? How often are you doing that? Because it's very specific, targeting the schedule of ratings for VA compensation purposes, which is not always necessarily in line with a medical provider is just trying to treat you, right? So they don't quite dovetail correctly. So that's why you need to provide that information directly, again, from the schedule of ratings for that doctor. And you want to make it somewhat easy for them. So you can do that and give them both of those. Here's the blank DBQ. Here's my responses to help you complete it. And then give it to the front office, ask them to complete it and submit it and return it back to you, right? My conversation, just as another piece here, just a kind of, I guess, a tip or trick with regard to getting those completed. Some people think, my doctor doesn't want to spend the time to do that, right? Because they want to make money. Well, guess what? You're the patient. And if you frame it correctly, right, they might be a little more apt to completing it. And my conversation with the doctor would be, hey, look, I have some forms that I need to get completed for the VA so I can get reimbursed for medical expenses. Would you mind completing this form for me? What the doctor, business owner or not, right? But whatever, the doctor is thinking, okay, cool. I'll continue to have a patient that might even step up the game a little bit and show up even more often because they're getting reimbursed for their medical expenses. Whatever they think is what they think. But I'm just saying that if you kind of word it that way, they might be a little more apt to helping you out versus, hey, I want to, can you fill this form out for the VA because I want to go get all my care taken over there, or I want to, go see the VA and have them do my medical stuff. I want to leave your office, type of mindset is not going to be conducive to having them help you. So your words matter. So as far as the private side's concerned, I think that the biggest takeaway, Clay, is what you said. And I totally agree. And that is that you ultimately have the control of what it's going to look like and what of it you can take out and submit for your claim. So back to you.
Yeah, I got 2 more things, and then I'll give it back to you to close us out. The first thing is because we identified a gap, and I think we have to address it. We had said it earlier, if you lack VA healthcare evidence, can the VA reduce your rating? That answer is yes, assuming there's a reevaluation in there, okay? Now let's take a picture-perfect scenario. You don't go to VA healthcare because of a billion reasons. It's too far away, you don't like your doctor, you don't like community care, maybe you just don't like the VA. Whatever that reason is, okay? So you have a reevaluation come up, there's zero VA healthcare evidence, but you have private insurance and you've been seeing the same doctor for years. All of a sudden you get a letter in the mail says, hey, you have 30 days. Your rating will be reduced from 90% to 50, whatever it is. And a part of that letter, the VA is going to be like, do you have any evidence or arguments against this? And you're like, well, brother, you messed with the wrong veteran because I'm prepared, right? I've been seeing my private insurance, right? So if you have a private psychologist, psychiatrist with medical records, you can go ahead and upload those and say, hey, I understand that you guys are looking at VA healthcare, but you're not looking at this evidence. And all of a sudden that reduction disappears, okay? And I say disappear, it's a long process, but you have evidence that's the point. So private insurance or private health records can absolutely be your saving grace for that. And then another thing, and you had mentioned it, Jason, I want to kind of double down on that. A CMP examiner sees you for, 5 minutes for some appointments, 15 minutes for most. 30 minutes to 2 hours for mental health, but it's a one-time visit. Okay. Now, the VA raters, right, whether junior or senior raters, they have to rely on CEP examiner's opinion. They have to. Raters are not medical professionals by any means. They're just people that are raters. That's it. And so the CMP examiner's opinion and their evaluation holds weight. But if you have private records and you've been seeing this doctor for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and there's a continuity of care, that doctor, there's a solid chance they know you better than you know you at that point, right?
Mm.
And so the weight of your, I guess, primary care would be what I'm trying to say. Your primary care, your family doctor, your practitioner that's a specialist in whatever, that holds weight over a CMP examiner. And that evidence can be used to combat whatever it is a CMP examiner is saying, because a one-time if there's a totem pole of importance, a one-time visit, it's still important, but it's a little lower than, hey, my doctor's been seeing me for 15 years for GERD. I'm pretty sure they know me, better than the CMP examiner. And that is an absolute solid argument that, if you're in the appeals process, will most likely be in your favor, just looking at that scenario. Those are only really two things I wanted to bring up, because private health records, they can be powerful. But Jason, that's all I got. I'll turn it
Yeah.
back to you, close us out, or if you have any other last
All
thoughts.
right. Yeah. I love that you brought that up. the idea about supplying that medical evidence that you have in the event of a notification of reduction, right? And look, if you ever get one of those forms in the mail, those letters, they are stressful. Most people get to the first sentence and they freak out and set it down, and then they pretend like it didn't exist. Then they miss the windows of opportunity and they do get reduced. So read the whole thing. You got 30 days to request a hearing, and you got 60 days to supply the evidence to dispute the reduction, which is very important. So you got that time to reach out to your doctor, and guess what? Even if you didn't have all, let's pretend, worst case scenario, you didn't do anything. You didn't go to the doctor, right? And all of a sudden you get that request. Well, guess what? I'm calling doctor now. Hey, I need to make an appointment. Bam, get in there and start to document, get that stuff, and then supply that. Whatever you can. Something is better than nothing. Obviously, like Clay said, if you had 5 years worth of stuff, or 3 years or whatever, that's better than I just went yesterday, right? But you need to supply something, and you need to start that process. Request a hearing. I always suggest, yes, request that and supply all the evidence you can. So, this was some great topics, and I hope that people were able to get some good information, some nuggets out of it along the way. Please share it, like it, all that good stuff. We really appreciate each and every one of you, and thanks so much for watching. Remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.